Good morning. I'm Karen Robinson, one of the Koinonia team members, and today we are continuing our process of learning about our community and the needs of our community. Welcome to those on live streaming, Facebook and YouTube, and our Zoomers. Debbie Smith is monitoring. If you have any questions or comments on Zoom, please put them in the chat, and Debbie will let us know about them. We are called to be the good in the world and the good in our community. Let us pray. God of all creation, fill us with a passion for justice and dignity for each neighbor in our community. Guide us and support us through Koinonia to follow your example and your command, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you. Transform us through your Spirit to become conduits of your love and compassion in all that we do, so we become reconciled to you and your creation. In the name of the triune God, amen. Our speaker today is Tamara Napier, a board-certified pediatric nurse practitioner. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Cabarrus College of Health Sciences and a Master's of Science in Nursing and Doctorate of Nursing Practice from the University of South Alabama. She has spent many years advocating for children at the Children's Advocacy Center and is currently a medical provider member of Levine's Children's Child Protection Team, as well as the Child Medical Evaluation Program for North Carolina. She and her husband live in Stanley County. They have 3 children and 3 grandchildren and love to spend time at the beach, canoeing, camping, and riding horses. Tammy will be speaking today to raise awareness about the difficult subject of child abuse and the prevalence in our community. Please join me in welcoming Tammy Napier.
Hello. Okay. So first off, thank you for having me today. Thank you, Karen, so much for that introduction. I want to start off by letting you know a little bit about me. I'm extremely informal. I know that you've had speakers along the way, and everybody's a little bit different, but I feel like I do my best when I just get up here and talk normally. I did provide a PowerPoint today, but I'll be very honest, I tend to not follow that. It's up there mainly for a visual and structure for myself. I get off on rabbit trails sometimes, but it just kind of gives you something to look at and supports what I'm talking about. So as Debbie, we spoke earlier, if you miss a PowerPoint, you do, and it's okay. So I want to start out a little bit only because before I get started, I need to come back and give glory to God this morning. It's so important to me, this work that I do, and I always, when I pray and I speak to the Lord, I say, before I get started, I need to mention the Lord in my work. So if you will just humor me for 5 minutes, then I will get to my topic. As she mentioned, I live in Stanley County. My husband, I have 3 children, 3 grandchildren. We live out on a farm. I'm very simplistic out there. The majority of my family are here from Concord, so I've always worked in this area. Been a nurse, fixing to date myself, 25 years, and just kind of gradually went up the ranks of education and different things, and so here I am. But when I say I want to bring it back to God for just a minute, as I drove up this morning, I honestly felt, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but I felt so empowered with the Lord. I'm so grateful this morning because, I'm driving up. It's a beautiful morning. I'm coming to speak to brothers and sisters in Christ about my passion of work. So what better platform and opportunity? So thank you for being here. I realize I've got a short period of time, so I will get to the point, but I want to start off by saying why or how I ended up in this work. So as she mentioned, I'm on a child protection team. I'm a nurse practitioner that specializes in pediatrics, and I'll get into a little bit more the things that I'm doing at this point in time that's kind of brought me here, but I want to back up just a little bit. Started out as a registered nurse, worked here in the hospital, quite frankly in labor and delivery. I wasn't even in pediatrics. Just kind of doing the daily grind like everybody else. You know, I really didn't have a particular goal. I'm just going to work every day, doing my thing. Never really thought much about, is this where I'm supposed to be? Just what I'm doing. And, you know, without telling the whole entire story, I remember going to, it was years back, but I went to something, if you've ever heard of something called a cowboy church. I know that sounds crazy, but they're called cowboy churches or something like that. But my daughter, you know, we live on the farm. She had a friend that went there that invited us. So I thought, let's go see. So comical, I don't even know the name of it. It was Cowboy Church. So we go to this cowboy church, and it was really good because they were just not there to impress anybody, you know, just there to worship, just there to be in the presence of the Lord. And I was actually enjoying the service, but as strange as is this going to sound to you, I'm not weird, but the Lord spoke to me. Not in an audible voice. I didn't hear an audible voice. I had a feeling that came over me that just took over everything, if that would make sense to you, that said, take care of my children. Not making this up. It was something that said, take care of my children, and it was an odd feeling to me. I really couldn't put sense to it, but I thought, well, this feels weird to me. What children? You know, I wasn't even thinking about that at the time. I'm not even doing child abuse. I'm doing labor and delivery. But I remember that distinctly, take care of my children. So after the service was over, I actually went up to the pastor and said, you know, I had this weird moment. I feel really weird right now. I felt this, I heard this. You know, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I heard this in my heart. So, you know, we spoke about it briefly, and really nothing at that point. You know, he just said, you know, guided me, and this is maybe where you're going in life, and, you know, that kind of thing. So I left it, and that was the end of that. And I never really thought much more about that until I got into this work. So, strangely enough, at that time, I was... I'd had my third child. She was pretty sick, and so I was not working. You know, I had been in labor and delivery, but, you know, I'm home now doing some part-time work, pretty much staying with her. And I got to thinking, you know, love my kids. I'm just not a stay-at-home mom. I got to get back to work. So we were out riding around one day, and me and my daughter, and there was this place in Stanley County. I know you probably haven't heard of it, but it was called the Butterfly House. It's over by the Stanley County Hospital. And I'm thinking, what is a Butterfly House? Well, what is this? Let me go in and see. I never do that. So I think it's strange that I just decided I'm just going to blindly, coldly just walk into this center, which is what I did. Took my daughter, we go in there. Come to find out, it's a child advocacy center. They do children of abuse, and they're looking for a nurse. So oddly enough, I said, well, I'll apply. So catching up to the story, I know you didn't come to hear that whole story, but it's important because it's me giving glory back to the Lord as to why I'm even here today. I took the job. That was in 2007, I think. Might have been 2008, and have been there ever since. So I fell into this work. When people say to me, why do you do this work? How do you do this work? Why did you choose this work? I'll be just very honest with you. I did not choose this work. This work chose me. So with that being said, here I am. And so it was important to me to share with you quickly that story, because I think sometimes, and I don't know about you in your personal lives, but I think sometimes we hear these little voices, we hear these little things, we have these little pull-ins on our heartstrings. We may write it off, but I would encourage you to listen. You know, if you're in a place of discord right now, maybe you're not sure, pray about it, because, you know, I think it will come to you. So with that being said, I will get into my work. What I mentioned is I'm a practitioner at what's called a Child Advocacy Center. You will hear me say CAC because it's a big old long word, and that's just what we call it, the CAC. So just a small history so it makes sense to you. CACs actually evolved for one particular reason. It was because there wasn't a united effort in the community to take care of child abuse situations. I notice I don't have any children in here today, so I think I can be a little bit more direct. I was going to be a little bit more cautious with the way that I speak today, and I still will, you know, but it's a very hard topic, and sometimes I've just got to speak frankly, and I don't mean to offend anybody in this room, but it's a hard topic that we talk about. So with children advocacy centers, they did not always exist. Now, they're all throughout the nation. North Carolina has several. I'll be honest, I don't know exactly how many we have, but the way that they're structured is they are county-based. Most of our centers are nationally accredited, but like I said, they're county-based. So for instance, Cabarrus County has a child advocacy center. Rowan County does, Mecklenburg County, Union County, Stanley County. Some counties do not have one, and therefore the counties that are closest to, let me use Stanley County as an example, because I live there and actually that's where I started out. That was the Butterfly House. The surrounding counties in that area do not have a CAC, so they filter into that county. So that's like, what are they? Montgomery County, Anson County, those areas, they filter into that. So, but for the most part, most counties have an accredited CAC. So with that being said, our CAC predominantly sees Cabarrus County cases. Do I see other counties? Absolutely, dependent on the situation. But for the most part, we pretty much take care of Cabarrus County kids. So I'll let you move on to the next slide. So speaking in terms of what we do, and again, I'll reflect back to that. Again, this is just for your, you can look up and read it, but I'm just going to speak informally about it. So children advocacy centers were formed because we began to realize that children who were victims of abuse didn't really have an efficient way to handle that. Sometimes they needed to go to law enforcement. Sometimes they were going through CPS Services, doctor's offices, emergency rooms, different things like that. So what we were seeing is that these children who were these small victims and these families who just fell so innocently into whatever's happening were being re-traumatized, so to speak, for lack of better words, because they were telling this same story and going through this same event at all these different disciplines. So they, like I said, they may have to go to the law enforcement and tell the whole story. But then they've got to go over to CPS and tell it again. But then they've got to go to their doctor and tell it again. So, I think the realization of that was some of these kids are falling through the cracks. Their families, they were not receiving the services that they need just because there wasn't, for lack of better words, a well-oiled machine to handle this situation. So CACs actually started, a little bit of history, in Huntsville, Alabama, and it was started by an attorney, not even a medical person. It was an attorney, Bud Kramer, back in 1985, who said, hey, pump the brakes, let's figure this out. So the communities began to realize we've got to come together as a collaborative effort and work together as a team in one centralized place so that we can take care of all the needs that this child needs. This child can do it one time, and the rest of us will go do what we need after that. So simplistically, as I mentioned up here, I'll let you read through that. I won't read it out for you. But CACs were formed with that plan in mind. So children's advocacy centers. Moving up to date, Jeff Gordon's is where I'm located. So just a little bit about our team. Everybody's structured a little bit different. Let me pop in there and say before I talk about Jeff Gordon's. Some CACs are privately owned in their communities. They're run by advisory boards. Some CACs are mental health owned, such as like Turning Point. If you've ever heard of Turning Point Mental Health Facility, they have a CAC. Some are hospital-based. That's your center here in Cabarrus County. So just saying, we all offer the same service, but structured just a little bit different, but provide the same services. The structure basically goes back to who's running the show, but we're all providing pretty much the same service. So Cabarrus County is actually fully owned by Atrium Health. We have what's called a child protection team. On that team, there are 6 physicians in the greater Charlotte region. These are my colleagues. And we basically staff at least one provider. Well, at this point, I'll be honest, there's one provider per facility. Of course, we'd like to see that look a little bit better, but at this point in time, we don't have that. So we have a medical director, Dr. Kendra Ham. She is centrally based out of Charlotte. And then in each of the facilities, currently, Atrium Health owns 4 facilities, 4 CACs. And those are based in Cabarrus County, Stanley County, Union County, and Mecklenburg County. So with that being said, each of us have providers there, and I'm the provider that's at Cabarrus County. It's all called the Child Protection Team. And again, I'm not following my slides. I'll be honest, I don't even know what slide I've got to go next, but if you'll move on, I'll see what I've got up there. Okay. So I was telling you about how we evolved and what we do. So, with the original founding CACs in 1985, I thought this was important because Cabarrus County actually started their CAC in 1998. So that's really, in terms of looking at the length, that was only like 13 years later, which is really not that long after the inception of CACs in the first place. So we've had our center since 98, and throughout the years, it's just kind of evolved with different structure and that kind of thing. But bringing you up to date, what we look like now is our center is actually located, if you've ever been up at the Jeff Gordon Children's Hospital up here in Cabarrus County. So they're on the 3rd floor. It's an inpatient unit up there. So the CAC is actually an outpatient unit that's housed within the inpatient unit, if that makes sense. So we have a small little office, very small, and up there it's on the outskirts of the inpatient unit. So with saying that, not a lot of people know that we exist there. We kind of fly under radar a little bit. I would love for more people to know about us, but at this time, it's just not out there like it should. So this is a great opportunity for me to share that we're there, and this is what we do. We receive kids from different referral sources, and I'll share that with you. I've got a slide on this as well, but you don't have to advance. Just hang on just a second. So we function as an outpatient center. We see kids on a daily basis, just like a regular doctor's office. We have scheduled patients throughout the day. So my general day is I will come in and I will see, kids throughout the day. For the most part, it takes probably 2 to 3 hours per family. So when I say I may see 2 families a day or a sibling group or something like that, it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but it's actually a full day by the time you do all what you need for each child. These are the people that are part of this team. So I put this on here to say, so you have centralized the child and the family. So a day in the life of the CAC. They will be referred to us, and I'll share in a second who is our referring sources. So when the child comes in, the goal here is for the CAC to be the central base. And everybody who needs to be a part of this case comes to the CAC. The purpose of that is so this child, like I mentioned earlier, is not going everywhere else. Everybody's coming to this child. Now, I bring this up because it's important to to me, it's important to mention that I'm not prosecution. My goal is not to aid in prosecution. My goal is the medical piece of this. But we all come to the table for the need of the child. So prosecution, they get what they want. That's whatever they're doing. CPS, they get what they want. Do I work with them as a team? I do, yes. But it's to centralize a home base for this kid, and then we all get the piece that we need, and then go out and do your thing. But my goal in providing, the CACs and providing this space was not to, help to prosecute or to help to whatever. So with that, these are the services they receive. So at the center, they of course receive medical services. That's my piece of the pie here. My goal in seeing these children is basically like any well visit. So the kids come in, they get a full physical, just like a well visit if they go to their regular doctor's office. So I do a well visit, and then I provide what they need, depending upon what they're there for. I'm not trying not to speak graphically, but I may need to do, lab testing for infections and things like that. I may need to do imaging. Do I have broken bones? Things like that. CTs, things, those are the things that I'm doing. So it's basically, like I said, just making sure that physically this child is well and referrals are made and they get what they need. Also at the center, we provide what's called forensic interviews or medical interviews. The name's kind of changed off and on throughout our inception. It's the same thing. What we have there is it's a registered nurse in our facility. Other facilities, they have a trained person, may not be a nurse, maybe a social worker or something like that. But these people are trained to interview children. So they actually go and they take courses and they have to get certified to be forensic interviewers of children. So the purpose of this is for the child to tell their story. If you recall, I was saying we don't want them to go all these different places. So the child will tell their story one time to a trained provider who knows how to address them in a child-friendly manner, not to traumatize them, not to lead them into saying things. So it's a very structured conversation that ours is a nurse, that she has with these children. In the interview room, we have 2 at our facility, just in case we have a sibling group and we may be doing, 2 at one time. For the most part, it's just 1, but Her role is to sit in there with them. We have audio and video in that room. So no one else is allowed to go in there with her for lots of different reasons. We don't want the child to be intimidated or scared or be led to say something or whatever. There's lots of different reasons why we just do it alone with the child. But the interviewer will talk to the child however long that needs to be. Now, again, there's a structure per age. We're not going to keep a 3-year-old in there, for 30 minutes. So there's a structure that she's following, and that's a whole different PowerPoint that I won't even get into. But just know that she's following a structure. We start interviewing kids at age 3. And I forgot to mention our age group, It's 17 and under. 18 is of course, an adult, and they would go through our SANE program at the hospital. But 17 and under is our population that we see. I'm sorry I left that out. But we do start interviewing kids at 3. We see kids younger than that, but of course not for an interview. At that point, we're just coordinating the team and making sure these kids get medically what they need, if I have a child, under 3. 3-year-olds get interviewed. So, again, it's just a structured conversation, and her goal truly is just to figure out what happened, if anything. Sometimes we get cases and nothing happened. So it's a fact-finding interview. That interview, like I said, is videoed and recorded for the main reason that, quite frankly, that we can have it later if we need it. I don't want the child to have to tell the story again. So if I have it on an encrypted disk, which we do keep up there, then I've got that child's statement of what happened without having to tell again. It allows us to work for that child without getting a whole nother statement, if that makes sense. But also, one of the main key pieces to our center is that we have the availability for team members, DSS, law enforcement, doctors if they need to come and actually witness the interview at the same time that it's going on. Now, they don't sit, in there with the child, of course, but they're in an adjacent room. So we have it where they can sit in a protected room, soundproof room, and they can actually watch it at the same time that it's going on. The purpose of that, and the children are told that, by the way, so they know that when they go in, that it's being videoed and recorded and that people may be watching them. Sometimes we have people watching, sometimes we don't. It's just dependent if the team, these people, the team, can make it to the appointment for the day. But if they can, that's really in the best interest of the child because they can get what they need, and then they leave the center and go do what they're going to do, but that child's only told it one time and did not go to all these different places to tell that same story. Usually the interview is done first. The purpose that we do that first is because I, as the provider, don't always know what I might be looking at. Sometimes we get kids in there for particular abuse, and they give, oh my gosh, a huge story about something else that we had no idea about. So I really need to hear the interview first, and I can watch it as well, so that I can do my best job on the back end and figure out, exactly what am I doing here, which way am I going here. But that's the services that they get there, and it takes probably 2 to 3 hours to get through that whole service. So, the interview, the medical exam, we then gather with them. We have a master's level social worker that we call a victim advocate. Her goal is to, even though the family will only come there one time, her goal is to continue to follow with the family because honestly, we don't want them to come in there and then all this happens and then we don't see them again. So part of our, all CACs, let me say, is national accreditation is to continue follow-up with these families. So our advocate will call the family on the phone. She works to get them resources that they may need because, again, sometimes when they come in there, we uncover different stuff. So that's her role, is to make sure they get what they need. She continues to follow up with them. One of the key players, and I've even got it up here, is mental health providers. I'll jump on my soapbox and say there is not enough in this county, but in any county period, I think, especially with, here's my rabbit trail, especially with COVID and things, mental health has just truly been on the rise, especially in our children, for different reasons. But obviously, for our children of abuse, that's a huge problem that we have. We don't have enough providers to refer them to. But they usually get a referral. They're referred to a trauma-based, trauma-focused program. We have several here in Cabarrus County, and sometimes we go out of county to connect them. Excuse me. Am I still on? I will admit there's a waiting list for that. So unfortunately, our kids don't get in right away. Sometimes they do, dependent. I don't know what I've done here. Hold on 2 seconds. Am I back on? But anyway, with that being said, Okay. With that being said, that's a big caveat. I mean, not a caveat. Yes, excuse me, a caveat. We don't have enough of it, but that is a big key point to what we offer. So this is the services. I want to quickly mention, I know I'm talking too much, I need to speed it up a little bit. Department of Social Services, our Child Protection Division, we get a lot of referrals from this group of people, mainly because they're the people out in the field. You know, they get them from schools, contact them, or different reasons. Maybe someone's called in and made a report. But CPS refers to us. Great point to bring this up. These are the people that refer to our agency. Now, we don't generally take referrals from the general public, and that's for many different reasons. We need it to be a valid concern, quite honestly. So this is how kids get to our office. So the CPS Services, I put the number here just in case anyone needs the number. We have our local law enforcement, and for our center, that's Concord Police, Kannapolis Police, Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office. And then, of course, any of our medical providers, anybody in the ER or offices, call and make referrals to us, because they're getting these kids on the front lines. And after they've screened them and saw them and they feel like there is an abuse situation, then those kids would come to us. And then we do the piece that we talked about earlier. I didn't put this on the slide, but on the back end of this, one of the other things that is good for this is our interviewer, as well as medical provider, if need to, we will go and testify on behalf of these children. Again, not to assist prosecution, but to keep this child from being quite so traumatized with what's happening. I mean, I'll be honest, no child needs to be sitting on the stand facing an abuser. To me, that's tragic, but that's a whole nother day. So nonetheless, we assist in any way that we can for these children. If you'll move on just real quickly. I've done a whole lot. Again, same thing. We can jump through this. This is just the process of how they get to us. I want to briefly mention this. We all know what child abuse is. But I want to point out that it's any knowing, intentional, or negligent act by a caregiver. And I say this because it doesn't have to be, on the part of the caregiver, it doesn't have to be a purposeful something. It can be a negligence of something. They didn't provide food. They didn't provide proper housing or whatever. There's a ton of things I could go through. And I know my time is coming up, so I'm going to quickly go through it. But it's anything like that. This is so important to me, and I really want to get this out. If I say nothing in here today, it is our duty to report. It's everybody's duty to report. So many people are afraid, and I get it. Before I did this work, I didn't know any better, and I thought I had to prove it. Like, I can't call. I don't know that that's really happening. I don't want to get involved. It's not my business. All these different things that we may think of. But I need you to think one thing. These are tiny, innocent children who need you to get involved. They can't help themselves. They don't even know what to do with this sometimes. It is your duty. It is your obligation. And I know I'm coming in strong, but I hope that you feel my passion. We have to protect these children. So I say this because just because you call and make a report, it would be to CPS Services. You don't have to give your name. You can be anonymous, because sometimes it's family members, and you might not want to give it up, and that's okay. But please report if you suspect. The key word here is suspect. You do not have to prove it. It's not up to you to prove anything. It is up to that investigative agency to prove if it's there or if it's not there. You only did your due diligence by reporting what you're concerned about. So I think that that's important. Do we get things that turned out to not be abusive? Absolutely. But that's okay. Do we get things that were abusive? Absolutely. And now we can step in and help. So, I just want to I just want to be forceful with this word, suspect. So please know, please report. Again, it's a form. When you call in, an intake person will get it. They'll ask you a bunch of questions. You may know the answer and you may not. If you don't, so what? Give them what you do know. It's okay. So I would encourage you to do that. If you'll move forward just real quickly. These are the types of abuses that we see at our center. Some centers only focus on a particular abuse. Our center will see all of this. I will admit emotional abuse generally goes hand in hand with one of the others. We at Cabarrus County predominantly see physical abuse and sexual abuse. That's our main things. We do see neglect. The emotional abuse tends to go hand in hand, like I said, with the others. The witness to violence, although that may not seem like it's abuse on that child, it really is. So we have kids, just to throw out some scenarios, it may be they're in a drug house. They may have witnessed domestic violence and somebody stabbed somebody or somebody shot somebody. So without, just giving every scenario, that's traumatizing to that child. So that's actually a form of abuse. So these are the things that we see. Again, our numbers at Cabarrus County, I've been doing it there, 8 years now. So the numbers have not declined. They have steadily stayed the same or moved up. And it's mostly physical and sexual abuse. If you'll move on real quick. I think this is important just so you can see how Cabarrus County stands up to everybody else. So I just went back to prevent child abuse. They do not have the 21 numbers out yet. So this was the latest, but 117,000 children were in investigated cases of possible abuse in North Carolina. That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids in North Carolina. Now, how does Cabarrus County measure up to that? So last year, I tweaked our numbers literally just last week before I came here so I could give you the most accurate number. We, at that point, had seen 265 children right here in Cabarrus County. This is astounding to me. 188 of those kids were under the age of 12. That's little. That's a small child. 77, 13 to 17 years old. So none of this, to me, is acceptable, I bring this up because, and I want to say this too, the total of 265 children, that's just children that were new cases. It's unfortunate, but we've actually seen kids that are repeats. We've saw them back. So we actually saw more numbers than this. These are just new kids to our system. So to me, that's sad. We shouldn't see one, much less 265. I think that's the end. If you'll move forward, I don't really know what I've got. Yeah, that's the end of that. So I realized this is a whole lot of information. I tried to cram in a little bit of time, but just to kind of let you know, it is prevalent in Cabarrus County, as is everywhere. Our children, need services, and we're doing our best to provide those things up here. Most of them do need mental health, like I said, but we get them taken care of physically, and then we got a while to work on them mentally to take care of what's going on. I want to also say just quickly, because I didn't mention it, but it's important. Please know it's not always the stranger at Walmart. It's not the bad guy in the Food Line parking lot. It's not the guy trying to get you to follow a puppy in the park. Do those happen? Absolutely. Is that the predominant abusers? No. I'm going to sadden you and tell you it is their caregivers. It is their parents. It is their aunts, their uncles, the people that these children trust to protect them. That makes it more sad. So, yes, that potential is out there everywhere, but the majority of our abusers are within their family. That's why it's so important for you guys to keep your eyes and ears open, because they need you. And sometimes it's the churches that are going to see them, or the school teachers, or, Sunday school class, or wherever they are. It's important for us to keep eyes and ears open. I realize that I have probably gone a little bit over, so I will hush right now. And again, thank you so much for having me and listening to this, and I'm open to any questions that you may have for me today.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yes, ma'am.
We will open it up to questions. Do we have any in the chat at this time? Okay, anyone else? Al.
Tammy,
Yes.
when I lived in Rome, Georgia, they had something called the Family Resource Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse. And
Yes.
so what they really focused on is not quite what you're doing, but sort of an adjunct, which was working with families. They had caseworkers and sort of training classes, and it was all volunteer. Nobody was forced into it, to help deal with sort of anger management, how to avoid abusing children and stuff. Sometimes they got where there was already child abuse. Sometimes it was where families felt like they were on the verge of it, or a judge thought they were on the verge of it, or saw issues and recommended it. Again, it was all volunteer. So it was really kind of more like training and prevention.
Yes.
Do you have anything like that here?
I don't, but I will tell you what I do know about that. I absolutely agree with you. Prevention is so huge. I work a little bit in Stanley County as well, and I hate to bring that up, but they actually have a program like that right now that I would like to see if we could pull into Cabarrus County. I just haven't done that at this point. So what they do is they actually have hired somebody through grant funding, and this woman, her sole job is to go into the school systems, quite honestly, and teach age-appropriate things to the children about, I think it's called stop, don't touch, don't tell, or something like that. I can't remember the exact name to it. But yes, they go into the schools, and she does things like that. They also have a community outreach, and I would love to see that come here to Cabarrus County. But yeah, prevention is wonderful. And I'm going to tell you, I talk with her a lot. You would not believe the kids that county gets through her program at school. They'll come up and talk to her afterwards. So she has gotten so many kids. Because here's the thing, they didn't know it was wrong. I mean, we as adults, we know this is wrong. If they grew up in that from day one, why would they think that was wrong? They don't know that these are wrong behaviors. Sometimes they do, once they get old enough and they talk to their peers and they figure out something's weird here. But yes, sir, I think that prevention is a great idea. I would love to see our center move a little bit more in that direction. I'll just be very honest with you that I'm completely atrium owned. I really can't make those decisions all on my own. But I do think that everybody would be open to some type of prevention program here, and I would love to see something like that happen here, because it's working wonders down there in Stanley County.
One thing I'll point out about this center is it's hard to really get good statistics, but they finally got some statistics that showed that versus a control group, when they looked at their clients, like 5 years later, the incidence of child abuse had gone from 80% to 40%.
Oh,
so
man.
the 40% is still tragic, but you think about all
Still,
the-
you cut it in half.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. And, too, we actually have, and I think that the caveat for us, I'll just be very direct, we would love to have volunteers and stuff like that, but because of what we do and that, the HIPAA rules and regulations and that we're under the Atrium umbrella, unfortunately, we can't really open the doors to volunteers to come in for that kind of thing. But yes, if the community would come up with some type of, that would be a great idea, some type of prevention program that was done outside in the community that we could, refer families or something.
These were all,
like that too.
so there was a big community support in terms of fundraising.
Yes.
I was on the board, a lot of volunteers and everything, but the actual client interactions were all professionals.
I would, I'm on board with that. I would absolutely love that, and I can certainly bring that to our team. But I'll be honest, we've talked about that kind of stuff before. It's just not really come to fruition at this point in time. But I'm with you on that. I think that would be perfect, just getting some type of preventative measures out there. Cutting it by 50% is astronomical numbers, so very much needed probably in this community as well. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments for Tammy? I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen now that kids are back in school face-to-face, that things have increased after 2 years of being away from their teachers and educators?
A little. And I actually was going to speak to that and forgot about it, to be honest. So I think when COVID hit, and any times, let me just back up and say, summers, holiday vacations, things like that, we always see a decline, quite honestly, because we don't have people who have eyes on these kids every day. And that's where we get the majority of our cases from, is from other people seeing them out and about, mostly teachers in school and things like that. So yes, I do feel like it declined, but I do think it's picked back up because kids are back in school. Their teachers are seeing things and noticing. Kids are reporting. We're actually getting kids who are reporting things that happened, a year or so ago, or however long ago, that they're just now able to tell somebody or talk about it or whatever. So I'm going to say yes, I think it's probably increased. Now, again, with our numbers in Cabarrus County, as long as I've been there, which has been about 8 years now, it's never decreased. We've always seen around 300. 1 year we almost hit 400, I'll say it, but on average, we're hovering around probably 300 a year for those kids. But yes, to answer your question, I do think they're back and people have eyes on them now, and we're getting some of that now.
So you mentioned that some of your clients are repeat
Yes.
cases, and I learned in the military when I was a family doc in the Army about the cycle of violence. I was on our domestic abuse committee. Are there programs to help the perpetrators in our county break the cycle of violence?
There is a program. There is some programs. I know that one of our main mental health providers that we refer to, Mr. Andrew West, deals a lot with offenders. I don't know of a program for adult offenders. I'm sure it's probably out there, but to be honest, I don't know of a program. I know that we do target, because we get a lot of, I'm going to say child offenders, child on child, teenagers, things like that. We have some younger kids as well, but he does work a lot with the general population, but also with children who are offenders, and maybe we can recreate some boundaries and restructure what's going on. So we refer to him a lot. He's the only one, quite frankly, that I know in this area that actually does offender evaluations. But I want to tag onto what you said, because you bring a point, it makes me think. So much of that, I hate to say it, but it's interfamiliar. I'm not saying that if you were abused as a child, you're going to abuse as an adult. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that it's prevalent in that population. Yes, you can turn it around, and a lot of parents have. But sometimes, if you were abused as a child, I see that so much. The parents, when we do our psychosocial evaluation with them, they will say, I was sexually abused by whoever. I was physically abused by whoever. But now they're, offending on their children or other children. So I do find that a problem as well. Not with everybody. I just want to continue to say that is not your legacy. That does not mean that because you were abused, you're going to be. Sometimes those families are more hypervigilant, to be very honest. We get them on the back end, and every little thing, rightfully so, I get it, they're scared to death that something might have happened. So I think it could go either way, but I do see it in families, like you said. And Mr. West is the only program that I know for our juvenile offenders.
So what happens to the perpetrators other than going to jail?
You talking about for the juveniles or just in general?
The adults. You said it's mostly the adult caregivers.
So usually on the back end, when I say the back end, after we see the child, they usually don't come back to our center unless we have a new allegation. So I don't generally evaluate a child for the same thing. They've already done that. But if something else new comes out, then we'll see them back again for a new allegation of whatever. Generally, we have law enforcement that work with us as well as CPS Services, and those people are assigned to the case. We call it a case. So they'll be assigned to this particular child's case. For the most part, they'll come to the center that day and listen while the interview is taking place and take their notes and whatever they need to do with that. From that point forward, I don't really engage in the prosecution part of it. What I do know that they do, though, is they will contact the family and go from there. They being the criminal investigators, the division, the detectives that do that, work hand in hand with the district attorney's office. I know probably everybody has heard Ms. Ashley Shanley. She is our ADA, and she is awesome at what she does. I'm going to give her kudos in here today because that woman works really hard for our children. Very passionate. It's not a job to her. It's like me. She's passionate about that. But she works with our local agencies as well. And from that point forward, I don't want to speak to the type of work that they do because I don't want to mislead you. I don't know everything about that. But I do believe they come together, and if there's charges to be made, they charge them. If there's not, then they don't. But I think that's decided upon the detective and the DA and whatever they do on the back end. Let's say, hypothetically, because not everybody probably gets charged, we get that information only after the fact so that we can then advocate for the families. They might need to know what's going on or where do we go from here. They're nervous and things are happening and they don't know. So our victim advocate actually tries to stay in touch and just work through it from, the social standpoint. But hypothetically, in a situation, let's say they got charged with something, then it would be like any other type of crime. They would end up, going to court over it, or they would offer a plea or whatever happens on that end, and it would go from there. A lot of the times, these offenders, and again, I don't know the different laws and the charges and things like that. I couldn't possibly speak to that if I wanted to. But whatever they're charged with, they may get on what's called the sex offender registry, things like that. I don't know that they all do jail time or they don't. It just depends on whatever the different penalties are. I don't really know what they are, but yeah, that's generically how that would go.
Does foster care tie into this for the children?
I'm so sorry.
Foster care? Where do the
Yes.
children who are,
Sometimes they do. That's on our CPS end of it. Like CPS would get involved if it is a caregiver situation, basically. So for the most part, they may get a report about something, but if it's not about a caregiver, they usually, what they call screen it out. It's not a case for them to investigate. Let's say it was a stranger at Walmart. That's not a CPS case, if that makes sense. But if it's a parent, or someone who is in the care of that, a legal guardian or something like that, then CPS obviously would get involved. Their main goal in that situation is safety of this child. Obviously, we can't have a child reside in the home that they have given us. I say they. I have nothing to do with that. Let me point blank say I have nothing to do with, removing kids or child custody or anything like that. But from a CPS standpoint, after working with them in all these years, they would put what's called a safety plan in place, whatever that plan is for them. It may be that they still reside with the parents, but the parents follow X, Y, and Z on their safety plan. It may be that temporarily the child is placed in what's called kinship placement. Our goal is not to take them out and just put them completely in some foreign place. If kinship placement may be an aunt or a grandma or somebody like that can just watch them a little bit while they figure this out. It's just called a safety placement. It's not a permanent placement. It's just an agreement, and the parents actually have to agree to that as well. To my understanding, CPS doesn't have the authority just to do that on their own accord. They say, hey, let's come together. Let's put together this safety plan. This is what I recommend. What do you think? And they all kind of come together on that. It's what generally happens. And when you speak of foster care, that's way on down the road. Yes, sometimes if they don't do it that often that I know of, but there are cases sometimes that they do have to take custody of a child based on maybe there's no kinship placement. I don't know. And in that respect, then they do have foster families and foster homes where the children can go to.
we just have 1 minute left. Do we have any other comments or questions? Any chat room? Okay. Well, I know Tammy has some brochures, information.
I forgot to mention them. I just brought a few handouts. I actually grabbed them on the way out the door on Friday, just in case you guys might want some things. Just a few handouts that we actually have laying out at the center for families who may want more information. I did do just a little card stock of the numbers to call, because I just like for you to have it in case you ever have a case and you think, who in the world should I call about this? I've got it for you right here. So yeah, if you'd like to have that, I've got a few little handouts right here. Don't feel obligated to take them, but they're there if you'd like to have them.
Thank you so much for this information.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you so much.
And next week, our speaker is Sarah Leonard, who is a foster care parent and a volunteer, and she'll be speaking about foster care. And again, thank you, and thank you for being here, and we're going to sign off.